questions, unanswered questions about the coronavirus. I feel like we're not getting the whole story about the coronavirus. There are several patients at the hospital who are at end of life. What is the coronavirus?
Coronavirus disease 2019, known as COVID-19, is a respiratory illness that can spread from person to person. Patients with COVID-19 have had mild to severe respiratory illness with symptoms of fever, cough, and shortness of breath. There is currently no vaccine to protect against COVID-19. There is no specific antiviral treatment for COVID-19. If you're concerned and you have symptoms, don't go to urgent care. Call your provider or call the ER or urgent
If you
care.
don't have anyone's number, call King County's coronavirus line at 206-477-3977. Or if that line is busy, you can try 1-800-525-0127.
This message is a public service announcement of Rainier Avenue Radio.org.
This is Big Poppy, host of Jazz from the Cabinets. Join me each week for a listening tour of the first century of jazz, an eclectic mix of Dixieland, big band, cool jazz, bebop, contemporary jazz, world jazz, all jazz in all forms. That's Jazz from the Cabinets with Big Poppy on Rainier Avenue Radio, streaming worldwide on RainierAvenueRadio.world.
This is the news on Rainier Avenue Radio.
Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte handed in his resignation to the president following weeks of political uncertainty and a split in the governing coalition over his handling of the second wave of COVID-19 and recovery funds from the European Union. Per NPR, if lawmakers fail to agree on forming a new agreement, it could lead to early elections and further uncertainty. The timing could not be worse. Italy has recorded more than 86,000 deaths from COVID-19. Of over 2.4 million confirmed coronavirus cases since it began the first Western country ravaged by the virus in March. That's the second highest COVID death toll in Europe after the United Kingdom. The country's vaccination program is slowing and unemployment are worsening.
And that's your news on Rainier Avenue Radio.
Would you like to see when your favorite Rainier Avenue Radio show comes on? Check out our show schedule, updated weekly at RainierAvenueRadio.world.
Welcome to Rainier Avenue Radio. This is Afternoons with Monique, recording live in Seattle, Washington, every Thursday at 1 p.m.
Good afternoon, everyone. You are on Rainier Avenue Radio, and this is Monique Lee from Afternoons with Monique. Today, I have the honor and the pleasure to bring on the show a national TV personality and a renowned sexologist, and a professor of sociology at the University of Washington, Dr. Pepper Schwartz. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you
Dr.
for that
Schwartz,
very nice introduction.
Yes, Dr. Schwartz, also known as Dr. Pepper on the TV show Married at First Sight, on its 12th, or is it 12th season?
Well, we're filming the 13th right now.
I had the pleasure of watching the show, and we're going to talk about that. And I'm going to get to learn. And I said that I would ask you some behind the scene stuff that I'm curious about. So I'm very excited to have you on the show.
Thank you.
Yeah. So a little bit about Dr. Schwartz. She, have you always been living in Washington? Just a little bit of background.
I came here in 1972. I actually grew up in Chicago, did my undergraduate work at Washington University in St. Louis. I was there 5 years for a BA and MA. Then I went to Yale University for a few years to get my PhD. And then I actually was in Portland for working on my dissertation a little bit here and there. And then finally to Seattle, which is very much my home.
Your whole career. And I know you've been at the UW for a very long time. We know some people in common. They said, oh, she's been around the scene. She's on a lot of shows and she had a lot of books out. So Dr. Schwartz is a New York Times bestseller. She's taught sociology at the UW, I believe, over 35 years.
It's 49.
Oh my gosh, you're an institution over
I
there.
know, my God, the numbers are daunting.
Wow, you look amazing, by the
Oh,
way. I can't
thank
believe
you.
how much energy you still have on the show. So, without further ado, I would love to learn a little bit about, your current work. Is the show the only thing that is in the pipeline right now? I know it's very successful. There's a lot of following and interest in the show. I personally saw this show about, I would say, several years ago, but I just did not stop. And I thought, what kind of people would go on a show, get married, and then figure it out later, right? So I kind of dismissed the show as foo-foo until I had the opportunities, folks, to watch a little bit of the opening of episode 1, and then I get it. I get why there's such a following. I get why there's such an interest in this show, and now why it's on its 6 or 7 year and 13th season long. So, Dr. Schwartz, would you tell the audience about the premise of the show, please?
Sure. The premise of the show is, if you had already made a vow, institutional and sometimes religious commitment to a relationship in the institution of marriage, would you try harder? Would you have a relationship that prospered that you might have thrown away too quickly if you were just dating? So I thought that was a really interesting premise. And in fact, what has happened is that we have had many people stay married, even have children. We have, I think, 7 or 8 kids now from various marriages. If in fact they said they were going to give it their all, and they did. It doesn't work for everyone, sadly. It is a high risk endeavor, but we have some people who are married and having families that I think got in their own way. Every other way they tried to have a relationship.
Well, did you say 7 or 8 children? Is that somebody on the show that actually did that, or?
Several families. I think the first show that you've seen with Jamie and Doug, they have 2 children, couples from Chicago, Dallas, Boston. They're all having kids. So, these are serious marriages. They're having families.
And I know that you have one show, at least in Australia. So you are going international as well?
Australia is a different kind of show, and quite honestly, not one that I'm in love with. It has the same name and some of the same premise, but from what I've heard from at least one producer of the show, it's all scripted. It's not reality, not real, and we are. It's very popular. It's the #1 show in Australia, but they engineer us a little bit like The Bachelor, where there's lots and lots of drama that's created as opposed to real. We are in 26 countries, some of which have their own version and language, others of which were in it but were dubbed. I'm not sure which is which, but I think for all the other ones, I think they're what they say they are. They're looking and chronicling and learning from actual people who are doing what they're doing the best they can. Australia is kind of an outlier, but it's very popular.
So when you say that you guys are in 26 countries, does that mean that you would pull participants from all these countries, or the distribution of the show is it has presence in 26 countries and audience all over like that?
It's just distributed in 26 countries. It's important to have each show in a specific city, because these people have to go on with their lives. They have jobs, they have family, they have a lot of things that tie them to that area, at least for the present. So we never do a show that isn't located in a very specific city.
Now, you are one of the main, if not the main expert on the show. How come we don't have a Seattle episode or a Seattle season?
Well, we never have. One of the problems is we have a huge commitment to diversity. And while Seattle has a really wonderful and diverse series of Asian communities, whether it's Samoan or Japanese or Korean or Chinese, really great. We don't have a very large African-American community. And when you get down to a specific number of people of a certain age who are single, who are willing to do this, etc., it makes it hard to do in Seattle. I'd love it here, of course.
Oh, so what you're saying is there is a high number of participants that would be willing to subscribe to the premise of the show and have faith in the process. That is a minority. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, we want that in every city that we're in. We're trying to make sure that we have diverse couples, and we're getting more and more diverse in the cities we're in. But we start per city often 2,000 to 3,000 people who are volunteers, and we winnow it down from there. So we have to have a large pool, even though we only have 5 couples. You'd be surprised how hard it is with all the things that we're looking for to get those 5 couples.
Now, you know that I am a relationship consultant and a matchmaker. So, of course, my questions would be much more in depth, and because I'm in the field and I don't understand the challenges of matchmaking and the pool of singles. Like you said earlier, you have to have enough diversity so that you can have all the characteristics you're looking for in different people and then bring them together. So on the show, it was mentioned that you guys, the show has about 20,000 applicants or participants that send in their inquiries or application.
It's way more than that. It's probably
really?
over 80,000 now
Wow.
across the country.
Is that from all over the U.S. or
Yes.
where are these participants pulled from?
It's 80,000 plus, I think, from over the whole U.S. And in a given city, we usually go to, if we have 2,000 or 3,000 in that city who are very interested in being married at first sight, or that we can, find through the various ways we look for people.
And where do you let people know that you are looking for people in a city? How do you let people know words about the show, trying to recruit in that city?
2 ways. One, on marriedatfirstsight.com. We're always saying information about where we're going next, like we're in Houston now. But also, when we go to that city, we have a casting team that goes out 2 or 3 months ahead of time. And they start looking at Facebook. They ask people who know people to recommend them. They will go to lots of institutions, from YMCAs to churches, and think like, or do you have people here that would like to hear about what we're doing? There are people whose whole job is just finding people. There's a whole team of people like that.
How many people is in this team? It sounds very big to do so much.
It varies per time. I know there's 3 full-time people, 365 days a year, and then they have people who work for them. So I don't know exactly how many people they have on their outreach. It's 3 or 4 full-time people who then get other full-time people.
Right. I know that you have a lot of books published about marriage, intimacy, relationship. How many books are there currently right now that you have out?
There's 25 books that I've written or co-authored, and I'm working on one now with one of the experts who's no longer on the show, Jessica Griffin, and we're just submitting a proposal called The Resilient Relationship.
What is it again?
It's called The Resilient Relationship. But we're just submitting it for consideration for publication right now. The other 25 are all done out.
Right.
You can find them on Amazon and places like that.
So you are a New York Times bestseller, and on the subject of sociology and sexuology. And I actually want to ask you something about that down the road, but I want to just chat with you a little bit more about Married at First Sight. When I listened to the show, or when I watched the show, it is said that the U.S. has a very high divorce rate. 50 or so plus percent of the couples in the U.S. got married will get divorced. And then you observe that outside of the U.S., in other cultures, the arranged marriage, which is the premise of the show, seemed to last longer. And then your team of experts went about trying to understand and narrow down the elements of what may make those relationships successful and reduce the divorce rate down to what I heard 1.1 up to 4 point something percent in different cultures. Is that study still accurate?
Well, what I think is misleading about that, and I do think it's misleading, is that in many cultures, whether you want a divorce or not, you can't have one. Or there's such strong stigma or even violence if you would attempt to have a divorce.
Right.
For example, in cultures like Pakistan and or most of the Middle East, which have arranged marriages, you have no choice. So I don't think it's actually fair for us to use that as a comparison for American couples where we have no culture, and we certainly are not going to enforce the marriage against people's will.
Right.
So they're very different. There is some research actually that has said that arranged marriages are somewhat less happy than love marriages overall, but of course more durable, because even in places where you could get a divorce, there's huge stigma against it. So I don't think durability is the best way of looking at success. I think for me, happiness of both partners is the best measure. And of course, that's a hard measure to get right.
Marital satisfaction. It's very interesting. We talked about this briefly, that the social stigma and the pressure from the community to stay married in other cultures, which force down the divorce rate. But I'm so glad I asked that question, because there was, I actually still thinking there is some merit for good arranged marriages, because, that's what I do. But at the same time, the marital satisfaction is an important element. So I'm glad I asked that question so that you can explain the context of those statements. When I watched the show, and I was like, oh, so they are basing this in other cultures' marital successes, and see if they can replicate that here in America. Right. And so I appreciate that answer very much. Why do you think the U.S. has such a high divorce rate? I think we are still number one in the world in terms of divorce percentage. Am I right?
I'm not sure. We're very high. Russia's also very high. There's such different marital systems, like comparing us against Scandinavia, where most people don't get married unless they're going to get a divorce, because then they want to get some government subsidies. But there's a huge number of people who live together. It's apples and oranges, but we have a very high divorce rate. Maybe the most interesting comparison is, let's say, against Canada, which is some ways a similar society, but it has a significantly lower divorce rate. And we could take another hour trying to explain why we have a high divorce rate. But I would say in general, we have raised the standard of what a marriage should be to a very high level, which makes it hard to do. And then, of course, we have a number of families that are no longer as using it in the religious context that makes many people stay, again, no matter what. And we have a culture of I'm going to do what I want to do, as opposed to
freedom.
I am feeling obligated to my family or my culture or my religion. We're very independent, which makes marriage that much harder.
Right. So what you're saying is that the high expectations of marital satisfaction in a marriage, that high expectation can dictate as an element of why couples get divorced.
Yeah, it's a high culture. It's a high expectation with less and less available time. There's some study, I think it was Kleinberg, but I'm not exactly sure, basically saying what I think is very true. We've asked for more and more of couples, giving them less home time, both working, trying to manage kids. I mean, we don't have much time to create intimacy. At the same time, we're asking for more and more and more of it. Right.
There's a lot of pressure on couples today to keep every part of their life balance, work, home, kids, marital bedroom expectations. So I think there are some skills that I believe people could learn to have better relationship. So during the show, I noticed in the beginning that there were couples that got chosen out of the large pool of participants and put together without expert in interjection or preparation. Is that still going on, or do you the expert prepare the participants ahead of time before they go in?
It's interesting. We do some preparation beforehand, but mostly we give them quite a bit of time for the next 8 weeks of the experiment. And it is an experiment. I mean, everything's at hyperspeed. These are the kinds of things that couples would do dating for a couple of years before they get married. You know, they have to do it like on hello, basically. We do try and help them, but we understand more about them as they go through the process. And then we try, all three of us as experts, to support them and to try and give them self-knowledge. A lot of people bring along with them the baggage that is inhibited and, in fact, often undermined marriage relationships previously. Some people need more work than others. We pick people who we think have great possibility for the future. But on the other hand, you know, our denominator are people who feel they can't do it by themselves. Otherwise, they wouldn't come to us. But
right,
they feel that way. And sometimes we see exactly why they didn't do it for themselves. We try and help them with that.
Let's talk about the element of faith, marriage, and also the faith in that the show premise would work is what made people embark on this adventure with you. And I quote that it's a daring social experiment and extreme. So hyperspeed is the word I would use to have these couples going through 6 weeks. Is it still 6 weeks, or is it 8 weeks now? 8 weeks?
8 weeks. And in COVID, when it happened New Orleans, it almost doubled that because everybody was suddenly sequestered. So, you know, that was extreme. But in general, it's 8 weeks.
So in these 8 weeks, these couples are expected to learn about each other, to get to know each other, both habitually and intimately. Their daily living, they are put together to get to know, but they still maintain some of their regular workday after the honeymoon period that you guys set them on. And by the way, do you pay for these participants to go on their honeymoon, or are they on their own there?
We pay for everything. We pay for the wedding party, the wedding dress, the tux, the rings, the honeymoon, and the place that we put them for the next.
That's a great draw.
What?
That's a great draw. For, you know, to have people that have some faith and want to be married and want to have a relationship, to, you know, kind of have the team of experts to help them and guide them along. And plus, you know, there's a lot of fun and joy in doing this. So I can see why people tune in. And you know, if the show was going to happen in Seattle, I would love to see some of my singles sign up.
If I'll tell you, if we come to Seattle, I will be on your doorstep saying, help me find great people. I absolutely
would.
Be
happy to. I've been living in Seattle for, you know, not as long as you have, but, you know, 30 plus years. But then again, you know, I only been, I live in Asia for the first 16 years of my life. So,
what part of Asia?
So I'm from Vietnam, and I have a brief stint in Malaysia. I was a refugee there, and my parents had a really good marriage, and it's very interesting. My family traditionally have a really long line of successful marriages. I wonder if it has to do with the fact that they're pretty educated people, and their spouses, my aunts and uncles, that they all have high level of education. And so I wonder, 9 children all went to college. That's almost unheard of in a third world country like Vietnam. But I wonder if that has an influence in how the marital satisfaction and the cohesiveness of my family may have come from. And then when I come to America and start dating the American way, things change. Things just completely look different when I got married, and the expectations of marriage is so much higher. But the level of satisfaction doesn't necessarily get higher. In fact, it got lower with the expectations. So I do what I do, and I want to be able to help people. But kind of like you, I think the show premise is just to educate and entertain. Am I right?
Absolutely. Educate, entertain, and not inconsequentially help some people find a lifelong love. I mean, that's what makes us happy when we when we help create a really great marriage and people feel love and security in that marriage. Well, we're very happy.
Well, if you have to share with our audience about a few key preparation lessons that you learned from the, not just the last 6-7 years of the show, but you are a lifelong learner and researcher
Sure.
of love and relationship. What would you advise our audience?
I'm happy to do that. Although, by the way, compliments on your own history and family. I think it's wonderful. And there is a correlation between high education and long-term marriage success. So we can just put that out there. But in terms of the things I think are the most important, I would say, first of all, give respect to your partner and expect respect. Don't take less than a respectful relationship. Do not let yourself off if you are not respectful for your partner. That's groundwork. And if you don't create that, nothing else. It's like not having a foundation in a house. You have to have that respect, both given and taken. And then I would say the other thing is you can't be too generous. If you are sure of the respect, then give a lot and also help your partner know how to give to you. That generosity goes a long way. And then the third thing I'd say is, because we all make mistakes, so you have to be able to forgive. If you carry an injury on and there's always a grudge in your heart, it's going to undermine your relationship.
So basically, in other words, embrace the differences and tolerate each other and treat each other with respect and kindness and generosity. All good premises, characteristics to have in any relationship, I
Right.
would say.
Yeah, I think they're probably good in any close relationship. And of course, we owe at least civility and respect even in our most minor relationships. We have to hold ourselves accountable to what kind of human being we are.
Well, Valentine's Day is just a couple of weeks, actually 10 days away. And that's why I invited Dr. Schwartz on the show to share with our audience about her work. It is such an honor to have you on, Dr. Schwartz, and I can't wait to see more of your work and maybe your future interview right here on Afternoons with Monique. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Monique. It's been really great. I really appreciate it.
Okay. Have a great day, everyone. You're on Rainier Avenue Radio. Next week, it will be Lunar New Year and also Valentine's Day. So stay tuned. There will be a mystery guest that I have not announced. So you will be, if you come on join the show on Thursday, February 11th at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, you will see who I have on the show for our surprise episode. Have a good day, everyone.
Bye-bye.